Welcome to Raw Radio.
And we're live.
That was very subdued.
I'm trying to communicate.
Are you? Are you? You're not a very good one.
I'm not?
No, I'm teasing. You're a very good one. Very well thought out in your communications most of the time.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. And hey, everybody has a hiccup every once in a while. But no, I think you're a very thoughtful communicator. Before you start, you kind of know where things are going. And you kind of know where you want things to go. But then you're also open to feedback and things of that nature. And communication is, I think, what we're talking about today, right?
Yeah. So it happens. We talked to Professor Octavio. One of the things,
Sure.
Speaking of communication.
Communication.
One of the most mind-blowing personalities that I have had privilege to interacting with within Jiu-Jitsu and even outside of Jiu-Jitsu. What a brilliant mind. And this episode even underlines this, in my mind at least. As I was reflecting on it before we start recording, the amount of, if we split the episode with him, percentage-wise, Jiu-Jitsu versus non-Jiu-Jitsu, it was half, if not more, non-Jiu-Jitsu. If we had to separate Jiu-Jitsu versus life, I think it was more life than actual Jiu-Jitsu. Like he talked about all these concepts, which he's huge on, concept theories. He finds himself as a global consultant. He used that word of consultant so many times, because in his mind it's not about Jiu-Jitsu itself. It's more about the communication of Jiu-Jitsu to his audience. What are your thoughts on communication in general, in Jiu-Jitsu community, in Jiu-Jitsu aspect, on and off the mat? Like, what are your thoughts on all of this?
I think there's different levels of it. And, you have the communication of, let's say, technique. I'm showing you something. I'm explaining something to you, or vice versa. So I need to communicate verbally most of the time, and physically show you what to do, right? Whether either with a partner or you and me together. But I think that on the flip side, there's also the communication that you have with the person that you are training with or sparring with or just drilling with, where you're communicating physically as well. You're reading their movements. They're telling you what they're doing by the way they move. And you need to receive that information. You need to give them back different information. So I think there's levels of communication as it relates to jiu-jitsu. And I think there's really good community. We talk about sometimes there's a world champion who's not a good instructor. So I think communication in jiu-jitsu takes on a lot of different forms, and some people are good at some of them, not so good at others. And I also think that once you learn, like, that you have that physical connection with somebody, and once you learn to communicate with them on a physical level, it changes drastically the way you perform in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with you. I mean, I think what was mind-blowing before I get to the answer.
You like that word?
Well, mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with this episode, it was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure. Yeah.
You guys already know by now, I make a lot of notes, but I'll show you watching this on YouTube. Boom. I have four, you can't see it right there.
No,
I have four pages. I have 4 pages of notes from this episode. So it was very, my camera reset it now. Boom,
there you go.
There it is. Okay, we back. It was very interesting from the aspect. I don't know what I wanted to say. Jesus, talk about communication. Completely lost train of thought. Go take it over. I don't. This is a disaster.
No, you're fine.
After you
I
gave me
think,
a compliment, I ruined the whole thing.
yeah, I did, right? But I think what I was saying, getting at, is it's a means of sending and receiving information, and you have to be receptive. Um, you know, I I said something during the at the end of the episode is I think in jujitsu, through your jujitsu journey, your training, everything, you have like these epiphany moments, you know, and and they're things that set you off like in a different direction. And I think when you're with somebody or learning from somebody who's a good communicator, that's when you have those. And if you look into Octavio and what he does and how he teaches, um, it's just a unique spin on things you already know, right? You know how to move, you know what works and what doesn't, but he kind of fills in these gaps, strings it all together for you.
Mhm,
And that's a gift that I think a lot of people don't have. And the way
mhm,
he communicates that to you is really eye opening. And it's like these, who says it? Oprah? Did Oprah say it? Like these aha moments
mhm,
where you're like, oh, I can't believe I never thought of that. That
mhm.
information has always been right there in front of me, but I
Yep.
didn't see it. Right. And he brings it to light and really makes these connections through the way he communicates. You know, it's not his verbal speak, it's what he has to say. It's not a flashy show. It's these little steps and demonstrations that he puts in front of you that makes you realize, oh, I've been thinking about this the wrong way, you know. And it's really eye opening, and I think that's what a good communicator does.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be. I'm going to be dwelling on this for a while because it really made me think. It really made me. He challenged me, um, just from the approach perspective, how important the communication is, and we already know communication is critical, especially if you are in this instructor role, a teaching role, or some kind of speaking role to whatever your audience is. But what was really mind blowing for me, or that hit me hard, is that he said you communicate all the time. You might not even know that you communicate. A verbal communication is just one of the many forms of communicating, right? And
Mhm.
and especially in jiu-jitsu, when we have this physical concept of touching and moving and seeking balance and reading and communicating back with our partner with these exchanges, it is critical that it is not necessarily me influencing my partner with what I want to do, but there is a back and forth exchange. If I
Yeah.
place my hand here, my partner will move his hand back and I will switch to something else. And then he will counter react. I will counter again. And it creates this flow of information. And it is a form of communication. It is a very strong form of communication, right? And especially what was very interesting for me is that as he travels around the world, he visits many countries, and sometimes language, a verbal communication, is a barrier. It is an obstacle, right, to communicate with everybody. But he said that there's never an obstacle when people grapple together. It's kind of the equalizer. Everybody's the same, no matter what the background, the profession, or the language, or corner of the world that you are from.
Hmm.
That communicator is much that communication is much easier if the
Yeah.
physical contact is introduced.
Yeah, I think you can go into I don't know. I used to work in the veterinary field. You could talk. You could be in a room with a bunch of doctors, and if you're not one, you have it's like they're speaking in a foreign language, right?
Hmm.
But there are the good ones can communicate to the nurses, the technicians, even the assistants that are there, so that everybody understands what's going on, so that when you're in a surgery, they have control basically of the room, because they're communicating on different levels with different people. And, when you take it into the jiu-jitsu world, one of the things I was privileged enough to do a private with Professor Octavio. And one of the things that I took away from it was these little movements that my partner's doing, I can follow, I can read. He doesn't know it, but he is communicating to me. He's telling me where he's going or what he wants to do. And I don't need to smash him. I can just follow him and shut that down with just a shift of my body weight. Leaning forward, leaning back, dropping my hip to the floor or keeping it and raising it over his body. And it's all these little tiny movements, body language, that you can read, that's the receiving part. He doesn't even know that he's communicating to you in a way, but you can see it, you can receive it, you can feel it, and we even touched on, he brought up what happens when, sometimes you roll with somebody that you go with all the time. It's a partner of yours that you're with all the time. And you can tell that there might be something wrong outside of jiu-jitsu because of the way they're rolling and how they're communicating. And something's off. There's something a little off. Hey man, what's going on? You're not yourself today. Right. And you can pick that up through the communication that you're having, through the physical contact on the mat.
Do you think listening is more important than speaking, or speaking is more important than listening?
I think they have their own roles depending on the situations you're in. I think as a speaker, if you're not receptive, then you're kind of just regurgitating something that you've memorized. We talk, one of the questions we always ask at the end of the episode is, what did it feel like when you got your black belt? And when people expand on that, they always talk about, the journey now is really just starting. Right? Or I've learned so much more as a black belt than I did in the 10 years it took me to become one. And that's the listening part. That's the open mind that you have to have to receive information that people are putting out to you. You filter it, right? Some of it's BS. Some of it's really important. Some of it, somebody puts a different spin on, so it makes you think of things differently. But yeah, I think that they hold weight.
Differently.
And differently, and that scale tips depending on the situation you're in. But I think that listening is always important.
Well, I think what's important really to acknowledge during this entire conversation on this topic is that listening is part of communication.
Yeah.
We can't ignore listening, and Simon Sinek speaks very, very openly about this. If you guys familiar with Simon Sinek, but also Nelson Mandela, I read his book a couple years ago. One of the things that really stuck with me was he was saying a great leader is the one who listens the last. Be the last one to listen always. I'm sorry, the last one to speak. Be the last one to speak always. Listen first. Hear everybody out. Your opinion is the last one, because the moment you start telling people what you think, you influencing them. They are no longer free to speak what is in their head. This was very interesting approach that stuck with my mind. And to be honest with you, it kind of changed the way how I communicate, from that point on. I really try to hear everybody out in the room before I express what my opinion is on things. And sometimes I don't even express it because maybe I was wrong.
No.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm so used to you letting me give my 2 cents and then telling me what you were going to tell me anyways. But
that's not
that's
true.
a different topic. Yeah,
that's not true.
That's true.
That's not. If you're watching YouTube, I want to show you this. We are past the time. I'm gonna wrap this up. Right.
See, exactly. You're shutting me down. If you walk into a situation not being open-minded and not being able to receive anything, why'd you have the meeting in the first place?
That's true.
Right? Just write an email and say this is what you're going to do. But go in and say, hey,
this is the difference between telling others what to do versus collaborating with others.
Sure. Exactly.
So
And it's a two-way street, and it's got to flow both
mhm,
ways.
yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, depending on the situation, somebody might have to take control and say, unfortunately, no,
Mhm,
we're going to do it my way.
yeah.
But if you're not open to listening to others, um, you're going to stunt your growth.
Well, listen. So I'm gonna step on the edge here, and I'm gonna say thank you for being on the show because you are a great communicator. No, I'm
Am
serious.
I?
I'm
I don't know.
serious.
I'm
I
trying.
think, I think, and some might disagree. Probably the ones who don't listen, but
Yeah.
to don't listen to our show. But listen, it is very refreshing to have you on, having these conversations with you and with the guests. You have a different perspective on things, and often you challenge me on things, and for that I do appreciate, because it makes me think, and then that's how we grow. So thanks for being a good communicator.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and now I'm gonna
And
pull my own way, and we're gonna finish
yeah,
this right now.
exactly. It's over. Goodbye.
All right, man.
uh,
Let's wrap this up.
all right. Peace.
All right, later.
Thank you for listening to Raw Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.